So my name is Mattos. I'm a sales and project manager for Harken Yacht Equipment. This project was for a longtime friend and client where we previously had a FAR 40 that we modified and turboed. That boat unfortunately met its demise due to a lightning strike. And a year that we weren't going to have a boat, Trevor decided that it was time to go a different direction and try something new. After a lunch and a quick discussion with the previous owners, we purchased a 1926 Herreshoff S-Class. This boat was built in 1926 in Bristol, Rhode Island at the Herreshoff Manufacturing Company. When we purchased the boat, there was some work that needed to be done with regards to the existing canvas deck. That was scheduled to be replaced in June. Thankfully, the folks at Jamestown Boatyard were able to accommodate an earlier schedule and get us in at the beginning of May so we could start the process of removing the old decking, moving the old hardware, and updating the deck as well as all the sailing systems. Based on the previous experience of the FAR 40 with the modifications we did, system layout changes and improvements, Trevor let me loose to kind of do what I wanted and reinvent this boat using modern hardware, but with respecting the aesthetic of what the boat is, the age of the boat, and showing appreciation and respect for the design. First thing that happened is we started off by peeling the old canvas, getting down to the wooden deck, and recovering that deck with Dynel, which is a more modern solution for an older boat with a wooden deck. The deck was then all gripped with non-skid, and then that started the process of installing the new deck hardware. We decided to go for a very clean black aesthetic. A lot of focus was on putting hardware, lines, and systems under deck, utilizing the spaces in the boat that aren't typically used, such as areas in front of the bulkhead or aft of the traveler bulkhead. My intent with the design was to be able to control the mainsail specifically from the rail. A lot of these boats, if not all of these boats, traditionally have winches and hardware on the cabin top, including a main sheet winch. From a racing perspective, it's really hard to control the main sheet winch sitting from the rail. You'd have to come in, make an adjustment, go back on the rail. The system I've laid out allows me to sit on the weather side, on the edge of the coaming, with my bum over the rail and trim the main continuously as well as the traveler. We tweaked the halyard setup on the boat. These boats are all external halyards, typically 1-to-1, and you end up with rather large windage profiles for these halyards. So we went with 2-to-1 for the main halyard and the jib halyard, purpose of which was to reduce the compression on the mast, greatly reduce the line diameter, as well as reduce the clutching or termination loads. Essentially, the main halyard has 2 Harken 150 cam cleats holding it, and the jib halyard has 1 Harken 150 cam cleat. This allows for adjusting the jib going upwind at full load. One of the substantial changes we made to this boat with the deck layout was removing all the hardware from the cabin top. So the only 2 pieces of hardware on the cabin top are 2 little fair leads for the spinnaker sheets and 2 snub airs to handle those spin sheets. The intent there was to give ourselves something that had good power when it's windy, also for reaching with the after guys. It's an easier, more traditional way of controlling the after guy as opposed to having 1 or 2 ratchet blocks in line. The reason I chose the snub air was versus a standard winch was to get the profile down. So much of the intent of this boat was to keep the deck looking very low profile, very clean, and respecting the lines. We've used a snub air successfully with and without the handle in the top of it. So only when it's, say, 17 knots and higher do we need to use the winch handle to control the after guy. The spinnaker sheet can always be hand pulled. So it's a really great, clean, simple solution for how we're sailing the boat now versus previous. All of the design work that was done below deck was to avoid using winches for anything but the spin sheets where you absolutely have to have them. So the snub air being the right size, the right weight, was a perfect option for this boat. What's a unique design aspect of the S boat is the tracks that are mounted amidships that run fore and aft. Typically, those would be referenced for Genoa leads, Genoa cars. Those are actually for the check stay and running backstay. We took it a step further on this boat where we've actually integrated the twin control onto that runner car. As you pull the weather backstay down, the twing pulls down as well, so it creates automatic twings. The backstay always needs to be pulled all the way aft going downwind in these boats, so it actually works out quite well. The leeward twing is typically not in play as the boom is quite low and the spin sheet deflects off the underside. On the jib boom, we've opted for zircon blocks to get the ease and efficiency in that system. One of the neat things about this boat racing Tuesday nights is they typically race non-spinnaker. So being able to easily pump the jib sheet to go wing on wing is pretty critical. And that zircon upgrade has been a fantastic change for the boat. One product I utilized a lot on the boat were the Gizmos. Some of them can be seen on deck in very specific places. Others are hidden throughout the boat. All of the halyards penetrate the deck through single-sided gizmos, and the traveler and main sheet fine-tune penetrations are done with the clamp-style gizmos. These have been great as they're low profile, they're clean, they're easy to install, and they've really allowed the design to take shape. Without these, I wouldn't have been able to do a lot of what I planned on doing. So the base of the mast, there's a lot going on. It's a busy space. The main sheet penetrates just after the mast collar. So the black and white line is the main sheet gross tune. The light blue and light tan is the main sheet fine tune. And when you look at the bottom of that picture, you can see where the main sheet fine tune splits off to both sides. That runs after the cockpit. The natural Technora and orange line is the topping lift, which is actually the old staysail furling line from the FAR 40. So that's kind of been given a new life and a new purpose in the new boat. The natural tech and green is the spinnaker halyard. So that runs along the floor to a cam cleat by the companionway. The natural tech red is the main halyard, which cleats on the bulkhead. And then the black and blue is the jib halyard, which runs same as the spinnaker halyard aft to the companionway on the floor. And the reason those halyards are all split like that is to try to create space for the person that's pulling on each one to have room to work. It's a long cockpit, but it's not super roomy where all the controls are, and you're kind of limited in what you can do from spacing things out. So the goal there was to create as much space as possible in a limited amount of space. So this is one of my favorite photos of the boat because this is the total marriage of old and new. Old frames, old wood, new electronics, new blocks, new running rigging, just kind of a neat marriage of the space. I don't know. It's one of the things I like about the boat, and it does a lot of different things well. And it kind of covers so many different generations. The interesting thing with the clash of old versus new, we did keep a bit of the bronze hardware. What's fantastic is the yard was actually able to bead blast the bronze and bring it back to almost a satin finish. And then adding new hardware onto the bronze just gives a really neat look at how we're attacking the problem and the solutions. The T2 loop blocks for the aft spin sheet block are a fantastic look at this, where it's the loop respects the old hardware. It will avoid any damage to the old hardware, but allows for modern racing blocks. It's a really neat marriage. In having some of that bronze to respect the heritage and history of the boat was quite key and important to us. So one of the things I wanted to do from our experiences with our previous boats, as well as the fact that this boat is doing more than just the local Newport Racing Series. We went to Opera House in Nantucket this year. Next year, we're going to be going north to Brooklyn to do the 2 feeder races on the Eggemoggin Reach Regatta. Is having the ability to navigate from a tactical standpoint, but also a safety standpoint, especially up in Maine. If you run into Maine, you typically hit rock or ledge, not soft sand, so pretty critical. I also knew from the past that we would want to have metrics for measuring performance and trying to frankly learn a new boat. This is very different than the previous boats the owners had, and wanted to be able to get ourselves up to speed. So hidden up in the bow of the boat facing forward is a B&G Vulcan plotter, which we run off just an average iPad. And then we've also buried 2 transducers for speed and depth in the bow. The boat's very V'd in the front. So we've set it up that as the boat heels over, it picks up the leeward transducer. So that way we get accurate depth readings as well as boat speed readings. We didn't put any wind gear on the boat because that would have been a step too far, just from an aesthetic standpoint. And then on the boat itself, the displays are actually hidden under the cockpit combings. So when you sail by the boat or motor by the boat, it looks like it's OEM from 1926.